Hi YouTube, it's your boy Grassy TV and welcome back to the channel. Today we're checking out my full build guide for the Chain Trap Marauder in Season 6 of Hero Siege. Master the art of deadly traps with the Chain Trap Marauder, a cunning and calculated build that controls the battlefield with devastating arcane traps. The setup revolves around chain traps, creating a web of explosive magic that ensnares and obliterates enemies in quick succession. With incredible crowd control, high burst potential, and a strategic playstyle, this build rewards players who can set up the perfect ambush. In the guide, we're going to cover the best skills, gear, and strategies to optimize your Chain Trap Marauder, ensuring that you turn every encounter into a deathly trap. I will have timestamps to every portion of this guide in the description below. Lay your snares and watch your enemies fall. Now, a quick disclaimer before we get started. The guide was created during the closed beta phase of Season 6 and is based on the content and mechanics that were available at that time. Please note that certain features, balance changes, or other game elements may be updated or modified as the game progresses towards its official release. The information presented here may not fully reflect the final version of the game, and some aspects could be subject to change. While I strive to provide the most accurate and effective build recommendations, future adjustments by the developers may impact the viability of certain strategies. Always refer to the official patch notes for the latest insights and information. Now, let's start with some pros and cons of the Chain Trap Marauder. First, you have very large AoE. You throw these really cool traps down, and they have quite large AoE. They do take a little bit of time, obviously, to get into max AoE, but you just throw so many of them down that go on top of each other. It's really cool. You're also playing a very safe, high crowd control character. The chain traps will actually knock monsters up constantly. It really sticks them in place. It's really nice, especially if you're playing hardcore or if you're in a situation where you want to be safe and not die. The traps do a very good job of keeping you safe. You also have a built-in damage reduction and a life passive, so you get physical damage reduction in a passive, and it also has life on it, life percent more specifically. And you nearly have a screen wide monster pixel stacking skill. It's called Ready Arius Net. You can use that to stack a bunch of monsters on top of each other. Some cons of this is there is a little bit of screen clutter and there is a bit of FPS lag. For the most part, this has been fixed compared to season 5. Season five's version of this was terrible. Unfortunately, on the beta for season 5, I didn't really have much problems, but for whatever reason in season 5, when it came down to it, not killing monsters, it was a little bit rough. I have since tested this and I was doing this live on stream. We were throwing a ton of traps into the dummies trying to destroy our FPS. And with really, really high cast rate, especially now that the FCR cap has been removed, I think the lowest I got to was like 45 FPS, and that was with a lot of traps going on, which is way, way better than we were experiencing in season 5. However, I do want to point out that you know that situation could still happen, but it's hopefully a bit more remedied now. Also, you cannot level as traps until level 60. You can, but you're gonna hate yourself. So I definitely recommend that you level as a bombardment or a fire marauder. We'll talk about that in the skill trees. Your single target does take a bit of gear to be decent. It's not going to be horrible, horrible, but it's not going to be, you're not going to be destroying Hellfire bosses or Inferno bosses with minimal gear. You're going to need to get some decent gear on to start getting that single target built in. You do not have a built in teleport. You do have crazy grapple. It's not my favorite movement skill, but technically you do have a movement skill. We don't use it as a movement skill in this build. We use it more as a way to pixel stack monsters. So you really don't have a movement skill on Marauder. And this is an arcane build, right? So it is going to compete with other arcane casters. And generally speaking, some of the higher end items for arcane casters does start to get expensive. So it really depends on how far you want to take the build, but it is totally league start viable. Now, let's talk about some of our skills that we're going to be using. Chain Trap is obviously our main damage. This is going to throw some chains, and they're going to obviously expand over time, causing it to hook monsters and dealing damage. You also have your pixel stacking skill, that's Ready Arius Net. You have passives, Flail Mastery, and Resilient Gladiator. Flail Mastery is going to give you attack speed, attack damage, cast rate. The attack damage doesn't do anything for us, but it's actually really important to note that you get attack speed and cast rate when using mace weapons. This is important because later on, whenever we use Gabriel's chest, it's going to convert part of our attack speed into FCR. So this actually turns into a double dipping passive. So you're getting attack speed that's essentially just cast rates. That's actually really nice. And then, of course, your damage reduction and life. And then last is our crazy grapple we talked about. This is what we're going to use to grab monsters and pixel stack them. You don't see me doing this in the footage. But basically, just is a grapple that swings around you that you can grab a bunch of arms with. I'm just really fast in this footage, and it makes more sense to me to do this like teleport and drop sort of gameplay. But you could also just run around and grab a bunch of monsters, throw a trap on top of them, kill all of them, and you could also hork them if you had the Graximom lure to treasure hunt on those monsters. That's a really cool option as well. If you are enjoying these build guides, I will have a link in the description to a donation page that you're welcome to support me with. I really appreciate anybody that's supporting. You guys are awesome. Let's go through some of the skill trees. Now, at level 1, we cannot level with Chain Trap. We do not get it until at least level 16. And even at level 16, it's not going to feel good. So I recommend that you level with the Juggernaut slash Fire Tree. We're going to put all of our points into Bouncing Grenade. At level 8, we're going to continue putting points into our Bouncing Grenade. We'll put points into Synergies, as well as we'll take 1 point into Crazy Grapple. This is going to be movement, I guess, right? You can use it as a movement skill. It doesn't go over hard terrain. And it's kind of weird, but I mean, it does work if you have, I don't know, maybe you're in a zone that has a really open area. It is nice to use in that situation. At level 16, we're going to place most of our points into Unstable Bomb for supplemental damage, or you can go all into Bouncing Grenade. Either way, it's gonna lack a little bit. It's not you. Bouncing Grenade, you could dump a bit more points in here to get more base damage out of it if you would like to, if you're doing okay on mana sustain. This is really just our best option. At level 30, we do respec. I go for max bombardment. This is a cooldown related skill. So you're not going to just drain your mana spamming the skill. It is something that you click it once. It has, an animation that does its damage window in, and then you have to, continue using it. So it's going to be much better on our mana. We want to make sure that we still have our Crazy Grapple. We put 1 point into Resilient Gladiator. This is up to you. At such a low level, this isn't really going to do much. We don't really have a whole lot of plus skills level 30 for this to really matter. So you could continue putting points into synergies or different things if you would like to. And then you can put 1 point to Ready Arius Net. This is still a crowd control, even though we're not level 60 and have the augment. We can still use it as a crowd control option. And then the rest of it we will put into Unstable Bomb just as an additional synergy. So we're gonna roll this until level 60. Continue just putting your points into your synergies for bombardment. This skill was changed in season 6. You can now aim bombardment, which will make it feel way better. If you're not enjoying bombardment, you can go back to bouncing grenade. Bouncing grenade is actually not bad either. I just prefer bombardment. It's just my preference, but you can do whatever you feel is best for you. At level 60, we are going to respec. We're going to put all of our points into Chain Trap to max that out. We'll put a bunch of points into Ready Arius Net as a synergy. Make sure you put a point in Crazy Grapple for being able to pixel stack monsters. Make sure you put a point into your Flail Mastery. This is going to give you some additional cast rate, as well as if you have any attack speed on your character, you can double dip with that. Make sure you put 1 point in Resilient Gladiator. This is going to give you your damage reduction and life. And at this point, you probably have some plus skills around your character, so you'll actually be taking advantage of it a bit more. And then you'll also put 1 point into Madness Control in the bottom right. This is going to give you an immortality passive buff that you can press, right? So if you're in a situation where like, oh shit, like there's a lot going on here, you can press this teleport skill, but it also gives you a short window of immortality, which is really nice. At level 80, we'll continue maxing our Ready Arius Net, and then we'll put points into Malpractice. This actually isn't Malpractice. This is Rending Flesh. It looks like Malpractice from the Plague Doctor, doesn't it? Rending Flesh, I believe, is the name of that skill. Actually, it looks just like the other one. So yeah, we'll put points into Rending Flesh. That will give us our additional synergies for Chain Trap, as well as you can see I have 20 points into the Trap Mastery. This is going to give you additional targets hooked. Technically, we're not hooking additional targets, right? But with Chain Trap, it does give it additional damage. Um, on the skill with the augment, right? There's we'll see within our sub skill trees that we have a way to hook additional enemies, even though technically we aren't hooking more monsters because we've removed the hook component out of it for it to expand instead. The additional hooks will give the skill more damage, right? So you want to make sure that you max out your mastery here as well. And then our final level 100 tree, You can see we have max chain trap, max the chain trap mastery, max radiary set, max your rending flush, 1 point in grapple, 1 point in flail mastery, 1 point in serrated chains. This is just going to give us some explode on arcane stuff if you would like to have that. And then the rest you'll put into resilient and gladiator just to get your physical damage reduction and your as much life as you want. You could forego this if you would like to go points into your flail mastery to get more attack speed, cast speed. You could do that. They have nerfed the amount that you get from passives for attack speed and cast speed just across the board. So for 14 points or whatever you have here, you're not going to get a lot of value out of this. It's really going to be maybe 20 or 30% total FCR that you gain from the attack speed and the FCR. So and that's not really going to be that much until you get Gabriel chest, which is an Inferno drop. I really think you're just way better off going into Resilient Gladiator to get the damage reduction in life, but that's up to you. Now, in season 5, if you're not aware, they did add sub skill trees to the game. Basically, this is a way that you can further put points into a skill to augment it. So you can see at the top right of skills, there's this plus sign. Clicking that's going to open up this new window that'll give you this star level tree, a sub skill tree. You gain 1 point for every 5 character levels, and you can do this for every skill you have allocated. So we have sub skill trees for chain trap, radiary snack, crazy grapple, and madness control. You can see our chain trap tree. We're taking this top left augment. This is what's going to allow our chain trap to expand, right? And then we follow this path up here, as well as I take 5 points into this hook range here. This is going to make it so that the trap will expand at maximum range. And then we want to dump the rest of our points into the hooking, right? So that we can get more damage on it. Now, whenever you're going for a single target for chain trap, you would probably want to respec this tree. You can see that we have increased damage to monsters that are inflicted with serrated chains. So you'll have 2 points here. This will inflict the serrated chains, and this will give you increased damage to the serrated chains, right? So you want to max this out, continue moving up, max out your targets, right? Grab your augment, and then you'll put the rest into this node here. This is going to give you arcane break on hit. That's what you will use for a single target. For Ready Arias Net, here's what our tree looks like. This is just going to help us pixel stack a bunch of monsters and give it a bunch of AoE. You can kind of mess with this however you want to. The main thing is that you just put 3 points into the Ready Arias Net. For Crazy Grapple, this is what I like to use to pull a bunch of monsters together. I do not recommend doing this if you're in hardcore because like say you grab a bunch of bees, the bees can still attack you even though they're in your grapple. The same thing goes for like bats and like all the crazy stupid projectile related monsters. So don't do this if you're in hardcore. But for softcore, it's totally fine. It's going to help tremendously by pixeling a bunch of monsters together. And last, you have our madness control. This is just our immortality skill that we use. It gives us a little bit of a teleport as well. You can choose to use this or not. For attribute allocation, skills can be a bit expensive to use early on. So we're going to want to put points into energy until we can find some sustain from mana on kill, as well as we can find some arcane skill damage items. It's just going to help with us getting more damage in general, so that we're not, dumping more points in and increasing the mana cost. We're getting damage from our actual gear. So either way, we're going to want to follow a 50-50 split rule with our attributes, 2 points into intelligence, 2 points into vitality, and then just get enough energy to feel comfortable. It's gonna be different for everybody, especially once you hit your level 30 and you have bombardment. This skill having a cooldown, you're not gonna need as much of a mana pool in order to sustain because you'll use your skill, you'll kill monsters, and you'll get it all back. But earlier on, whenever you're on bouncing grenade, you're probably gonna need a bit more mana to just help sustain yourself. I would say probably anywhere between 200 and 300 mana would be enough. But you can also find mana and energy on charms. I think this is slept on a lot by people while they're leveling. They don't look for this on charms. It can make such a huge difference being a caster having mana on your charms. It's such a night and day difference. Do not sleep on that. And then once you get to end game, you're going to dump all your points into intelligence just to give yourself the most amount of damage. And of course, if you're in the end game and you feel like you have enough damage, you could always spec into full vitality if you're in hardcore. This will just give you an absolute shitload of life, especially since you have the passive for life as well. All right. So for gearing, this section is going to be designed to give you just workable suggestions on what gear to acquire at different stages of the game. In this situation, since we're pre-leveling with fire and then switching into arcane at level 60, we kind of have a bit of a different gearing section here. This will be in the written guide where I have it listed out pre-level 60, post-level 60, so you can see what that swap looks like. But the main thing to understand here is that you want to be looking for your level 60 gear while you're leveling to level 60. Okay. You're going to have to double dip into this fire arcane and look for arcane gear while you're looking for fire gear. Heads up. Fortunately, they've kind of gone away from needing to find flat damages on like every piece of gear to get damage. Like you can obviously still find skill damage, like flat skill damage that's base damage, but it's not as I don't want to say it's not as common, but it's not as common to be honest with you. And it's a bit easier to find as well. I know that sounds a little bit weird, but like while you're playing the game, you're gonna find like sources of like 7 to 12 fire skill damage. That's not hard to find. Finding the higher tiers of it where you're getting like, I don't know, 20, 30 skill damage, that does become a bit more uncommon. So you'll kind of understand it once we get through this a little bit. So again, we cannot level as Chain Trap until level 60. So for most of our leveling, we're going to be searching for rare and mythic items that will match our character's damage type. You might come across some satanics that are going to make sense to use. I can't guarantee that you're going to drop any specific satanic, nor am I going to recommend that you stop and farm out for any specific satanic. That's a waste of your time. Continue pushing forward. However, there are rune words that are practically guaranteed. You're going to find the bases. You get the runes from your Act 1 quests, normal nightmare and hell, for basically free that you can use to prospect runes down to make some of these early rune words. So that's what we're going to be focusing on for leveling. So here are some of our pre-level 60 items and affixes that we're going to look for on our normal through mythic items. We're mainly looking for all skills, fire skills, flat fire skill damage, fire or magic skill damage percentages. Faster cast rate because casting more is more damage. Getting sustain, getting into this magic skill damage, getting mana on charms and items, getting faster cast rate, getting like movement speed on our boots and just different places can help move around quicker. This right here is the main gist of what you're looking for on items. Normally, while you're leveling through the game, the progressing through the game, it generally just from getting levels and over leveling, like putting points into skills will give you enough damage within the skills to complete, normal, basically to get to nightmare to start farming out stuff in nightmare. But this is generally what we're looking for. However, there are some rune words that we could try and get. One would be Sky Song. This is basically like the spirit of Hero Siege, but it gives you skills, faster cast rate, and a bunch of mana. You can definitely make an early Sky Song. It will help you a ton. Make this in a one-handed sword. For offhand, same thing, looking for our fire slash arcane related items. And then going for either a Sky Song on a shield as an offensive option or a Divine Contemplation as our resistance defensive option. Helmet, same thing. We're looking for our fire slash arcane related gear. And then Scholar would be a really good rune word helmet. This gives you a skill and some sustain, as well as you get 14% physical damage reduction. This stacked on top of our resilient gladiator will make us feel pretty good against physical damage. Chest, same thing. Looking for that fire slash arcane gear. Shadow is going to be a really, really easy item to make early on. You'll get a bunch of movement speed because you don't really have a good movement skill. This will really help just moving through zones. You could also make an Angle Oxawana. This has a ton of arcane related stuff on it. You could also make a Moltening. It's basically the exact same thing as an Angle Oxawana. It's just a fire version of it. So it would be, let me edit this right now. I'll add this in. So it could be Angle Oxawana or Moltening. I recommend that you don't really go for the Angle Oxawana, or excuse me, you don't really go for the Moltening just because they're not expensive, but you kind of want to save these runes that you're going to use, like these mid runes for the Angle Oxawana, because getting to level 60 doesn't take that much time. But once you hit level 60, you want to have the juice because you're going to be an arcane caster, right? If you just end up having an abundance of runes and you would like to make a moltening, it's the exact same thing as this Angle Oxawana. It's just fire instead, right? That can really help boost your push to level 60. So that is an option as well. For gloves, just looking for mythic gloves. Boots, your quick steps. These are going to be the fastest amount of movement speed. If you find a goal rune or a mal rune, you can make ghosts, right? These will give you up to two skills. You get physical damage, magic damage reduction, movement phasing. These are really nice too. This is what I recommend that you get whenever you're on Chain Trap. But Quick Steps is going to provide you the most movement speed and it's much cheaper. So you can decide how you want to go about this. So those are your options. Otherwise, you're just going to look for mythic boots, prioritizing your movement speed to help traverse through skills through zones faster. For belts, right? Just looking for our typical fire, arcane. Same thing for rings, same thing for amulets, and same thing for charms. The big thing on charms, though, that people really miss out on is getting life and life percent. You can get so much goddamn life out of charms. I remember whenever I was leveling my Viking, I had 10,000 life. Just I was playing a life stacker, of course. I was trying to get as much life everywhere in my gear as I could, but I had 10,000 life at level 100, right? Just coming out of the campaign. You can get a ton of life from charms. Same thing goes for energy and mana. Same thing goes for your sustain. Same thing goes for like enhanced defense. If you found an S tier base in normal that you, I don't know, you made a an item on that now has 2000 defense on it, getting enhanced defense is a global modifier. It literally multiplies that total defense value. And that's your chance to dodge enemy attacks and projectiles. That can really help you make you feel a bit tanky while you're going through the game. So like all of these things are really, really important to try to get. The only difference here is I would go maybe for arcane related ones, right? You could find some like some magic skill damage charms or some resistance charms can be really strong as well. It's just people skimp out on their charms. They don't use them to their full potential. And this is me trying to help make sure that you guys realize there's a lot of juice that you can get on charms and make sure that your highlight filters are set up to help find some of these things while you're leveling. It will help you tremendously. Now, once we hit level 60, or if you're not level 60 yet, I recommend go to the Rat Den, Act 1 Nightmare, start farming out Rune War bases, get to level 60. You want to have a bit of arcane related stuff before you switch out to your Chain Trap at level 60. You don't want to do that until you are 60 and can get the augment. But here are just some additional things that you're going to look for, right? I won't go too in depth. This will all be in the written guide. And it's basically the same things. You're just going to switch to arcane related stuff instead, like Sky Song, Scholar, right? Angle Oxwana, Shadow, gloves, boots. You'll make your ghost, your quick steps. It's literally the same stuff. It's just arcane related instead, right? So I won't go too into depth with that. That is all in the written guide. Now, once we hit level 100, there's not really any best in slot gear. There are definitely some options that we can start looking at. And a lot of these options could be mythics, they could be satanics. I'm going to kind of go through these different versions that you'll want to look for, different items that will make sense for your character at this point. So, your weapons, Sky Song, you can find this with on an int base or a skills base, could be really strong, or magic skill damage base could be helpful. You don't have to, but that could give you some extra juice. Same thing for divinity. You can also find a intelligence skills, magic skill damage base. Divinity is very strong. However, you're going to have to find a lucky Vex in order to make a divinity. And what's cool about divinity is you can actually wear two of these, right? You can dual wield divinities. These have four skills on them. 50 faster cast rate, up to 40 resistances. They're very, very strong to have for early weapons. But again, you will need two Vexes. Another option here is you can make Dragonite's Flare. You can find Dragonite's Flail. This is a satanic mace that is basically a poor man's divinity. It's literally stat for stat the same thing. It's just not as high of stats, right? So that would be a good option as well. Offhands, again, you can go for a Sky Song and a Shield. You could do that second Divinity, or you would go Divine Contemplation to get a bunch of res on a Shield with block. Rift Eye, Gem and Crescent Tower, those are all great options as well. Helmets, you're probably wearing a Scholar or whatever random mythic helmet that you're wearing currently. Those are so easily replaced by any of these. Curator, Witches, Crown of the Midnight. Try and get any of these. They're fantastic. For chess pieces, ton of options here. Gladstone Goose is going to be the most defensive in terms of you get up to 52 all resistances. I know this says 65 has been nerfed a little bit. It's 52 all res. You're not using the Angle Oxawana. Honestly, this is probably the most offensive one outside of maybe Heaven's Might, but Heaven's Might is a bit rare, right? And you have to find one with a decent amount of skills on it and sockets. I wouldn't count on that, but maybe you can find one on the market for cheap or you end up dropping one can be a fantastic option as well. For gloves, any of these are perfectly fine. I recommend Wisdom Holes. It's going to give you the most amount of skills with FCR. You could also go with Meviuses. These can roll with arcane skills, up to 3 arcane skills with some FCR, and then you also get life and mana. These are fantastic as well. Boots, try to make Ghost. Ghost is going to be your best option because you have that movement phasing. Since you don't directly have a movement skill, you're going to be running through enemies at the start of the game. This will make it feel much better to getting through monsters. But I could also see where you might go for Hermes boots just to get the additional resistances. For belts, any of these are perfectly fine. There's not particularly one that I would say over the other. Maybe Sash of the Magi is going to be the most offensive because it has the highest amount of magic skill damage. But Knight's Girdle giving you 2 skills, or Commander Sash giving you up to 20 res with the skill. Like they're all really good options. I would say Viper Magi being possibly the least desirable option for me, but I would still take one for sure. For rings, Kodo wedding bands are probably your best option here, just because you get the up to 30% movement speed and a ton of life. These are going to help you just run through enemies. Because really, at this point, you're going to have more than enough damage to kill monsters. You just want to get through zones quickly, and this is going to help you do that. Iron Ring of Prometheus will give you some resistances, some magic find, as well as FCR. But you could also find Absence of Constraint. These are fantastic. Ton of FCR, ton of arcane skill damage. You can find Satanic Eyes. These will give you a ton of resistances. You can find Mythic Rings that have plus skills on them. Any of this stuff is perfectly fine. For amulets, Dark Lord Sigil is my preferred option, right? Ton of arcane skill damage, ton of res and skills. I can see where you maybe go an all seeing eye because you get 3 skills, ton of magic find. Any of these are perfectly fine. For charms, try and again get do not sleep on your charms. Resistances, life, magic skill damage, cast speed, or even attack speed for later on. You can find charms with just attack speed on them. But cast rate as well. Let me edit this and put attack cast speed. Right. All of these are fantastic options to get some sustain like mana and life on kill to help while you're farming. Movement speed, you can use that as a way to zoom around through zones. Any of these things on charms is beautiful. Now, in season 6, Moonshard has been changed to an SS Satanic. So the drop rate has been nerfed a bit. However, I do still want to show this here because it is very important to get penetration on casters in general, more specifically on an arcane caster. You can also find this minus enemy arcane resistance on just mythic charms or just charms in general, right? So use this as a way to try to get some additional pen will make your damage skyrocket. As well as Damien's Cage did get buffed. The drop rate of it was nerfed a bit. It's now 4 skills and it goes up to, I believe, 45 intelligence, which is 45 magic skill damage. Very, very strong as well. Now, moving on to the mid game, in order to scale an arcane caster, there's going to be a lot of things that you need to understand, just different affixes that you need to understand. First, you have increased arcane skill damage. This is going to be a direct damage multiplier to your skill's base damage, right? So as you put points into a skill, it has a base damage value, then it's multiplied by things like arcane skill damage, magic skill damage, and intelligence, because intelligence is magic skill damage at a 1-to-1 ratio. So you're gonna take your arcane skill damage, your magic skill damage, your intelligence, so the magic skill damage that you're the magic skill damage that you're gaining from intelligence. You're gonna add all those together, and then you multiply that by your base damage, and that is essentially the best way to scale your damage early on. Now you are gonna get additional skill levels from like soft points that you gain from items, right? You get plus skills and items, plus arcane skills, that sort of thing. And you also have faster cast rate, right? Faster cast rate also gives you more damage because the more that you can cast your skill, the more damage you're going to do. So all of those are very important to scaling up your damage. Another important part of this is we talked about just a second ago is the minus enemy arcane resistance. Monsters have resistance against you. And this is not a like a difference in resistance. This is a reduction. So if a monster has 10,000 arcane resistance, right? And you're ignoring 100% of it, that monster now has zero arcane resistance against you. It can be a huge damage increase to get 100% any enemy arcane resistance. It is one you absolutely will need to in order to scale up your damage. Now, there's a couple more pieces to this puzzle. One of them is break. So arcane break specifically is kind of like a curse. If you apply 50% break to a monster, they're going to take 50% increased damage of whatever that elemental break type is. So in this case, it's arcane break. They're going to take 50% arcane damage, which is a stupid amount of damage. And the same thing kind of applies to extra damage. Extra damage goes after all of these previous calculations happen, and then it's extra on top. It's multiplying. So if you had, 10% extra damage, you take all of this stuff here and then you multiply it by that 10% extra. So it's a very, very strong. There's different ways that you can get extra damage if you had sources of like, extra damage to burning monsters and you use, different things on your fire side of the character to apply burns. Well, guess what? Now you can get extra damage to burning monsters. It's a great way to multiply your already very high damage, if that makes sense, right? Generally speaking, getting extra damage early on isn't as strong as getting extra damage later on whenever you have a lot of sources of scaling your damage already, and then you're multiplying that already scaled damage. So hopefully that makes sense. I will have this is all in the written guide if you want to read through all of this to get a better understanding. But let's go through some of the different items that we're going to look at in the mid game. First, we have Divinity, Celestis. Both of these can be made on plus skill bases, right? These are both fantastic. Blood Moon is also a fantastic option, right? You get an absolute shitload of movement speed out of this. And especially later on, you can get this with, the increased attack speed, and this will convert to FCR. So this can be a fantastic option for that. Another big part of this is you gain movement phasing. This will allow you to drop your ghost boots for ether walks or another pair of boots that we'll talk about. As you get movement phasing with the blood moon crescent, you also get skill movement diminished, decreased by 75%. This means while you're throwing your traps, you're not going to be taking a movement diminished. Right now, there is one. Right, you're going to have a 75% reduced diminish. It's really nice. It'll make the build feel really clean running around. The other option here would be Dawnbringer. If you happen to drop a Dawnbringer, or if you're able to afford a Dawnbringer, this is a fantastic mace to get. It's going to have everything that we want on the character. However, they will be, rather expensive. Just something to keep in mind. For offhands, you're going to want to get a Celestial's Authority. There's really not a better option here. You just get so much penetration up to minus 60% enemy arcane resistance in one item, as well as you're going to get some sockets for all res. There's really just nothing better. And at this point in the game, this plus one of Celestial's Might, this will convert all of your increases to damage into arcane at a higher conversion rate. So it gives you more damage as well. If you can't find a Celestials, you can't afford a Celestials, maybe you drop an Ancient Aegis or you get a Suomi or Sumi, Finland, Brickell. Like these can be good options as well, but you really need to get into that Celestials. It'll help a lot. For helmets, Side of the Gods going to have probably the most value because it's going to grant you a source of teleport. But if you have teleport from like Enigma on a chest, you could forego the Side of the Gods for Delirium. This will give you on a plus skill space. This would be 13 skills, which is a shitload. Very, very good chest. Very good helmet if you have the teleport on your chest. And then, of course, you could also make Curse. This is going to be kind of expensive, right? You need a Sur rune, and then it has a random skill, so you'd have to hit the arcane, and just what you get out of it, you're kind of better off going a different route. Harley Quinn Veil can also be a great option. 5 skills, a ton of all res, ton of magic find. You get 3 sockets. You get their extra juice in that. Physical damage, magic damage reduction up to 12%. It's actually very, very nice. Again, chest strategy Enigma grants you teleport. It's also going to give you a bit of extra juice. Like you get some magic find, you get some physical damage reduction, 16% life. Can also give you some juice in here. Make this on a plus skills base. And then you also have an option if you do decide to go the side of the gods, maybe you drop one or you're able to pick one up for cheap. You could go the Gem Kings option. This will give you, I know this shows fire skills, but if you use pristine amethyst, this will be arcane skills, as well as it's going to give you arcane skill damage instead of fire skill damage. You also get cooldown on here, which doesn't really do a whole lot for us, but that is on there as well. And then if you're in hardcore, Azarius's Iron Thorn Breastplate is such a good chest for hardcore. You get so much damage reduction. You get a ton of sockets for your all res, vitality, extra damage to stun monsters if you have a way of stunning, up to 5 skills, and then you're gonna get combat orders if you're struck. Can be really nice. It's honestly just a really good chest for hardcore. For gloves, Arcanums are gonna be generally our best in slot here. There are some other options, right? Like Shadow Cultists, you can farm these out from Sungli. He's the Uber boss of the Eternal Battlefields. Spellweavers, they get buffed a bit. You can get a pretty good amount of skills on there, right? This is a rolling skill, so you can get Arcane on here. All res, damage to mana. These can be decent as well. And then Fighter Magi grips, like, again, if you happen to pick these up for cheap or you drop them, these are pretty common for gloves. These can be a really good option. Moving on to boots. Ideally, you're going to want to get Ether Walks with arcane rolls on them, but it's going to take a Sir every single time you roll these. You could also go for Pearlescent Dreams. These are nice. You get a bunch of arcane, excuse me, you get a bunch of all res, some magic skill damage. You also get Holy Aura. This will give you some additional arcane skill damage. You could also run Fuma's Boots. These will give you more movement diminish. So this will help you if you're just, playing the run and gun. And you also get a bunch of arcane skills on them as well. For charms, ton of options here. Tablet of the Awakening, you can socket elemental gems in here. You can put Umbrins in here. Hell, later on, you could put Moonstones in them just to get more attack speed to convert to faster cast rate. Ton of options on your tablet. Try and get a 4 socket tablet. And then there's a ton of charms at this point. If you get lucky on the Annie, Arcane Pumpkins, Torsteins, Folgies, Loaded Dice, all those are fantastic charms to get. If you still haven't gained your Moon Shard from here, you need to get your Moon Shard, your Damien's Cage, right? These are just such good charms even in the mid game. Now, once we get to the end game, there's a lot of min maxing we can do here, as well as you can now slam items with satanic crystals. This will allow you to either add a new affix to the item or it might destroy it. So as of right now, I don't really have a list of all the possible corruptions. I don't really know what all of them are. I know there's definitely some there's some crazy ones. So this section is not going to include me using slams on items because there's no way I could ever, guarantee you're going to get any particular slam. This section will include a build that I tested and that I kind of refined and what I can confidently vouch on its effectiveness for. So, builds are always subject to change. They're always subject to personal preference, specific encounters involving strategies. There may be more optimal variations depending on your playstyle, the zones that you're tackling, or the bosses that you're facing. Feel free to experiment and adapt. This guide only serves as a strong foundation, but the best build's the one that's going to work for you. So here's a snippet of my current setup and what gear I'm wearing in the footage. As well as I wrote that information down for you. This is all in the written guide for you to check out. They recently kind of changed out Gabriel's. That's why I keep having to add it. It's really good. It got nerfed a little bit, but it's such a strong chest now for so many different builds. Very, very good. It is also something you'll have to farm out from Inferno difficulty, but it's well worth it. Okay, moving on to relics. Here's a list of relics I recommend. You can kind of switch these out for different things that you want. Maybe you decide not to go the lost one. It no longer gives you 40 FCR. I believe it's 20. So you might want to switch that out for Holy Grail for like bossing and stuff as well as once you get a ton of FCR. The Holy Grail proc will be up all the time. Be really nice. So here's just different charms or relics that I recommend. Same thing for potions, just a bunch of different potions based on what you need, damage or utility. Um, Ghostly Potion will give you magic skill damage. Wizard Potion will give you cast rate. Almond Raw's Demise will give you explode. Elixir of Will and Cognition will give you XP. Witch's Potion will give you a life and mana button. It's an instant life and mana. Gold Inlaid will give you Magic Find and Gold Find. Empty Bottle of Vodka will give you plus skills. Bottle of Rad will give you movement speed and phasing, as well as if you probably already have a source of burn from your fire skill tree. You can use a caffeinated coffee container. This will give you increased damage to burning targets, which we will be able to burn with that if you would like to go that route. Another thing to mention is you could also pick up some of the potions that will give you increased attack speed once you're in a Gabriel's Broken Wings. That attack speed will also be converted to FCR. You could use it as a way to get additional FCR for, teleporting around or whatever to smoothen out your build. For chest augments, Monstrosity is going to be the most damage. Survivor's Shield will be good for hardcore. And then Spellslinger is okay, right? It'll allow you to gain increased cast rate for a portion of your magic skill damage. If you just, if you want to get more zoom, you could go Spellslinger. But Monstrosity is going to be your most damage option. For hero levels, I do have an entire guide on how to spec your hero level tree, since generally it's only going to provide you utility over direct player power. There's a little bit of power in there, but this video will go through the different paths that you might take based on what your situation is for your character. It really just kind of depends on what you get as you level and look where your gear currently is and your gear currently is and what you have. So I recommend giving that a watch. I'll have a link to this in the description. Same thing for all the glyphs. Glyphs do not provide any power at all. They're just all utility. Currently, that you're going to be making decisions on them based on what content that you're wanting to engage with. So I again will have a link to this video in the description showing you all the glyphs and what they do. You can start making a game plan on what glyphs that maybe you want to try and go for and use on your build. For the mercenary, we are using the Act 1 Night Merc. Currently in season 6, mercenaries only have one purpose. They're just magic find warbots. That's all they do. So we're going to want to make sure that we stack as much magic find on them as we can and try to make them tanky boys. You can see my mercenary skill tree has damage reduction. It has life per hit. It has life regen, some armor. It's basically what we run. And then for our gear on him, we're really just looking for as much magic find on weapons as we can go. Just a side note here, Aurora's Might no longer uses a fel rune and now uses a key rune. It's a one of the lower high runes, but you do need a high rune to make Aurora's Might. I don't even recommend that you generally go Aurora's Might if you're in hardcore, just because if your Merc dies and you lose the res aura, as well as the res aura that is on it got nerfed a little bit. So I don't know. Personally, I don't like hinging all my resistances on a Merc, but if you would like to do that, Aurora's Might could be an option. Otherwise, look for any of these Magic Find weapons. Same thing for chests, just Magic Find chests. Same thing for helmets, just a bunch of Magic Find helmets. And same thing for offhands, bunch of Magic Find offhands. Put Istrunes in all of these, get as much Magic Find as you can on your Merc. That does apply to you. Now, for loot filters, I'm going to quickly explain how to set up a highlight filter or leveling early in the game. You'll press escape, go to options, gameplay, loot filter. It's going to make your screen look like this. On the left side, sorry, on the right side, you have these different highlight presets. Now, while you're leveling from 1 to 60, you're going to use the Firecaster preset. Once you hit level 60, right, you're going to want to switch to the Arcane Caster preset. Now, it's a little bit difficult here because while you're leveling, you're going to want to look for arcane related stuff as well. So you're going to need to go in here and edit your highlight settings to include arcane as well. And how you will do that is you're going to click on helmet, and at the bottom, you'll see highlight. And you'll just scroll down until you find arcane skill damage, and you'll select that and I'll hit apply to all and go. Right. That's going to be the easiest way for an early highlight filter. I am going to be making a video for how to set up filters for every archetype in the game. It's just a little bit different for this one because you are dual specking. So I will try to create a little snippet on how to do dual specs, right? So that you can kind of watch that and get a better understanding of what I mean by selecting your dual highlight spec essentially. Now, same thing for the filter section. The filter part of it is what's hiding certain tiers, certain tier of item. So while we're leveling up, you can just follow the filter preset, honestly. If you're in normal, click on normal. If you're in nightmare, click on nightmare. If you're in early hell, click on early hell. I will have some end game filters, but there's really not a whole lot that I can do in terms of the actual filter part of it because I don't know where you're at in your gearing at any specific time other than the very start of the game. Right. So I just recommend just follow this. You're probably going to see a bit of extra items on the ground, whatever. Just look for the beams and the highlight and just follow that. That's going to be your best option in terms of loot. And then once you get into early hell and in the end game hell, I will have some filters that you can use. But that's just unfortunately kind of where the game is right now with the options I'm able to give you with the tools that I have. Now, I do have some additional helpful resources here. If you're a newer player or if you're just a returning player, you want some additional information on Hero Siege. I have a ton of extra resources, such as my beginner build guide. This is or excuse me, such as my ultimate beginner guide. This is a 2.5 hour video. It covers pretty much anything and everything that you want to know on how to log into the game to what dungeons are, what key dungeons. Like, there's pretty much anything and everything you would want to know in this with timestamps on everything. So I do recommend checking that out if you're a newer player. Also, if you're a newer player, before you do start the new season, be sure that you equip your companion. Everyone gets a companion for free, right? A lot of newer players don't know that. You do get a free companion while you are leveling, there's a difference between additive damage and skill damage. Skill damage will work for your actual skill, and additive damage is weapon damage, right? So if you are hitting a monster with your weapon, whether it be a gun or an axe or whatever it is, not the skill that's coming out when you hit, your actual weapon hitting, that is additive damage. Skill damage refers to the actual skills damage, and skill damage works with multipliers. There's also now physical skill damage for those of you that aren't aware. So you can scale up physical skills now with physical skill damage. So there's some additional information on how this stuff works in the written guide. While you're leveling up, there are some zones that you might want to run to and farm out for XP or just to get some gear. I do kind of list those out for the different difficulties. Mainly, it's normal Nightmare Hell. You're going to go to the Rat Den. It's my favorite place in the game to look for gear in. But there are some other places that you might want to stop at if you want to over level. While you are leveling, there are not any required quests in Hero Siege that you have to complete in order to get through the game. You can skip every single quest in the entire game. Does not matter. You do not have to do them. However, I do recommend that you do your Act 1 normal, Nightmare, and Hell quests because you do get runes up to Vex rune from some of these quests, as well as in Act 1 normal. You do get a 15% movement speed charm and a 40% movement speed potion that can really help you, especially on the Marauder since you don't have a traversal skill. Pretty much, you can zoom around with the potion and the charm. Now, if you need some additional information on how that damage formula works, I do have that listed here for you as well. And I do have a link to the season 6 live patch notes. If you want to check out what is going on for season 6, there's currently like 900 lines of patch notes for season 6, as well as the estimated start time is March 14th at 7 a.m. CST. So I will have a link to this in the description as well. We also have the official Hero Siege wiki available. This is managed by some of the mods and some players within the community. I've been working on keeping this updated. So if you just, want additional information, a read, check out some items, then read through some different, classes, whatever it may be, the wiki is available for you guys as well. Now, I do have an early game progressions tips and tricks video for whenever you hit level 100. A lot of people ask me, "Yo, Graxy, I just hit level 100. I don't know what to do. What do I go farm? Do I need to make money? Like what do I do?" Right? If you kind of feel lost because this game doesn't have directly a mapping system like people are used to from POB and Last Epoch and those sorts of games. So this has a full written guide available to you that you can read through, as well as I do have a video that talks about all this information if you want to put it on the background and listen so you can get a better understanding of what the hell you need to be doing at level 100, right? Next, we have the Hero Siege Helper app. Be sure that you bookmark this. Very, very good website made by Seiko. He put a lot of time into this. There's a ton of really cool information here, and it's presented in a different way. So I just recommend that you get this website a check. You have a link to this video that explains everything about the website. I kind of go into detail on what you can and can't do on the website. It's really cool. And then, of course, I will have all of my builds available in the description as well if you want to check out any additional content from me to find your next build for season 6. With that being said, that is going to wrap up this build guide for the Chain Trap Marauder in season 6. Be sure to like and subscribe to the channel to keep up to date with all of my future Hero Siege related news and content. And check me out live at twitch.tv/Graxy_TV. We are going to be making a tier list for both leveling and endgame. That way, you guys kind of have an idea of where certain classes are in the beta at the moment. And yeah, thank you guys for watching, and I will see y'all in the next video.